Okay. Hello, everyone. Welcome. Today, I would be presenting Facebook's Tectonic file system efficiency from Exascale. My name is Kash Mishra, and this paper is quite dense, so I'm going to try my best to unpack it all. I've tried to include things that were not in the video presentation on the Fast21 website. Let's take a look at Facebook storage requirement first. They have got images and they have got analytics on them. So Facebook storage requirements can be split up into two types of storage systems. One of them is blob storage. These are photos and videos posted on Facebook. This is like exabytes of data, and file size can range from several KBs to several MBs, and it's quite latency sensitive. Let's take a look at this dog here. So earlier, Facebook had two storage systems to handle this blob storage. One of them was called Haystack. Haystack handled hot blobs, which had very high access frequency. And once the access frequency kind of calmed down for those objects, they were moved to F4, which contained warm blobs. There were a couple of problems with this setup. It had poor resource utilization. Haystack was very IOPS bound, and because of that, it had to over provision storage to accommodate peak IOPS load. Whereas F4 had large amounts of less frequently accessed data. So it used to over provision IOPS. So they had a situation where they had a lot of resources which were going unused. The next storage system that they have is a data warehouse, which has massive MapReduce tables. It contains their AI training data and models. This sort of storage system prioritizes read and write throughput over latency because it is usually used while batch processing. So due to batch processing, they do a lot of large, huge size of reads and then write, then the blob storage. And previously, Facebook used to rely on HDFS, which is the Hadoop file system, for all of their data warehouse needs. Problems with HDFS were that HDFS uses a single machine called name node to store and serve the metadata. So this limited the size of clusters. They ended up needing tens of clusters per data center to store all their data. And because of there being many clusters, all the services which use these, like their analytics, their news feed, they had to be aware of where this data is placed. And this led to another problem, which was a 2D bin packing problem. Like when you want to distribute data sets among your clusters, you had to be aware of the capacity of that cluster and the available throughput on that cluster. So because of all these challenges with these specialized storage systems, they were operationally pretty complex. Facebook sought out to build one storage system which could serve all their needs and which could have proper resource utilization. So they mainly had three challenges for designing the system. They needed to scale their storage to exabyte scale. They needed to provide performance isolation between their tenants. Here, a tenant is a specialized storage system that we were looking at earlier, the blob storage and the data warehouse. And they wanted to enable tenant-specific optimization so that their performance is comparable to the specialized storage systems. With that, let's take a look at Tectonic architecture. A Tectonic cluster is made up of storage nodes, which is your chunk store, metadata nodes, which is your metadata store, and there are stateless nodes for background operations like garbage collectors, rebalancing. In all of them, the foundation is the chunk store, and on top of chunk store sits the metadata store, which has two components: a scalable key value store, for which they use ZippyDB, and they have stateless microservices which are responsible for constructing the file system logic that clients would need. The scalability of these stateless microservices enables Tectonic to store exabytes of data. Both the chunk and the metadata stores run independent services to handle read and write requests for data and metadata. Now, there is no baked in configuration logic to these stores. All of these services that we see here, they are orchestrated by the client library, which sits outside of the system. And this orchestration, as we'll see later, enables their tenant-specific optimization. So we saw what the challenges they were facing earlier, and the presentation is split according to how they overcame each of those three challenges that we looked at here. The first challenge was scaling the storage to exabyte scale. For that, we'll take a look at the chunk store, which enables this. A chunk store is a flat distributed object store for chunks. If you see the diagram here, Facebook internally uses a file system called hybrid XFS, in which they store the XFS metadata in an SSD, and actual data is stored on an HDD. There are files lying on that XFS, and then chunks are basically just collection of files, and a collection of chunks makes up blocks. So number of chunks that you store, that can grow linearly with the number of storage nodes that you have in the system. And chunks here are oblivious to the higher level abstraction like blocks that we see here. Reading and writing to chunks can be specialized to a tenant's needs, since everything is controlled by the client library. And the unit of durable storage that Tectonic provides is actually blocks. The next thing in the system that we are going to look at is the metadata store. The metadata store has the set of microservices, as I mentioned earlier. And file system metadata is stored in a key value store called ZippyDB, which is a linearizable, fault-tolerant, sharded KB store. So all the data that this metadata store stores is managed at the shard granularity. And all of these shards that this store uses are replicated with Paxos for fault tolerance. So Tectonic actually relies heavily on this metadata store for its read after write consistency for data operations, all their file and directory operations involving a single object in the file system, and all the move operations on a single shard. This key value store does not support cross shard consistency, so Tectonic is not able to give us that. Let's look at what this name layer, file layer, and block layer means. So name layer contains all the names of the directories, upper level directories, and in the system. And these are stored as a list. So you have a root as the key, and then all of the directories that are there inside root, all the subdirectories are stored in the list. The file layer actually maps what files, like where these files are stored on the blocks, and blocks eventually map onto your chunks. If you see this table, it shows the different metadata layers and what they map and how they are sharded. The name layer again maps each directory to its subdirectory and field. The file layer maps file objects to a list of blocks, and the block layer maps each block to a list of chunk locations. So block, as we saw earlier, are the unit of durable storage, but what gets eventually stored are those chunks. All of these layers that we see, they are actually hash partitioned by directory, file, and block IDs respectively. So each of these layers. So this fine-grained partitioning scheme, they have done this to avoid hotspots. So they give an example of a data house workload where related data is grouped into directories, and many files from the same directory may be read in a very short amount of time. So in this case, that directory where all of the files are being requested becomes a hotspot. With hash partitioning, listings of two subdirectories within the same directory will live on different shards. So since that information is living on different shards and the subdirectory contains the information to your blocks, so the block layer information is also hashed among shards, and this is independent of its directory of file. In turn, since everything is hash partitioned, the scheme ensures that traffic is evenly distributed among all the shards in each of the layers. Each layer does not know about the layer just above it, which I think is a very which is why hash partitioning works for them. So due to the chunk store, you can just add nodes to it and your storage will increase, and you can just add more compute to metadata store. And due to all of these factors, I think they overcame the challenge of reaching the exabyte scale storage. The next challenge that they had to overcome was enabling tenant specific optimizations so that they could reach the performance of their specialized storage systems. Tenant specific optimizations are purely driven by the client library. It controls everything, how it orchestrates the entire chunk store and metadata store. It tells them what to do and when to do it. So it exposes a file system abstraction, and applications have per operation control over how they would configure their read and writes. The client library is also responsible for replication and RS encoding their data and writing chunks directly to the chunk store. All the reads are usually, they say that their reads are one pass only, but sometimes they do have to reconstruct chunks from the chunk store for the application. And the client libraries have a single writer per file, so that they can write to storage parallelly. It's really interesting that everything in the system is driven by this client library. They have a token system for enabling the single writer per file thing. Whenever an application opens a file or it wants to append to a file, it needs to give a token, store a token to the metadata store. And if another process wants to write to the same file, then it will just, then the token gets refreshed, like whichever is the new process, that token gets to the metadata store. So the writes from the previous process are ignored, and whatever the new process will write now will be there. The next challenge that Tectonic had to overcome was performance isolation between tenants. So for this, Tectonic split its resources into two types of resources. One was ephemeral and non-ephemeral. So ephemeral resources are storage IOPS and metadata query capacity. For these types of resources, the demand changes are very real in time, are very real time, like they can change from moment to moment. The other type of resource that we have is non-ephemeral resource, which is our storage capacity, which changes slowly and predictably over a period of time. Tectonic manages this at the tenant granularity. And if you want to increase your storage capacity, then that reconfiguration has to be done manually. Tectonic came up with the screen to manage the resources effectively. And this division into resources has been done so that it can distinguish latency sensitive requests to avoid them from getting blocked from large requests that need to be served. So we're going to especially look at how the ephemeral resource handling is done in Tectonic. So there are many applications that will use these storage systems. So ephemeral resources cannot be managed at the granularity of applications, since it would be since the number of applications is very large. So to bring down the cardinality of this problem, Tectonic came up with the idea of traffic groups, which is around which are around 50 per cluster. So applications are grouped into traffic groups per cluster, and each tenant is responsible for choosing their appropriate traffic group. Then each of these traffic groups is assigned a traffic class, which indicates what its latency requirements are. And this traffic class ultimately determines which request will get spare resources, since spare resources are distributed according to traffic class within a tenant. How does this exactly happen? First of all, to start with, each tenant gets a guaranteed quota of that cluster's resources, and those resources are subdivided between the tenant's traffic groups. So all of the surplus that you might have for those traffic groups, you can share among them by descending traffic class. This ensures that spare resources are used by the groups of the same tenant first before they are distributed to other tenants. Elasticity of resources is achieved via a rate limiter, which increments a demand counter each time a request comes in. So the rate limiter implements a modified version of a leaky bucket algorithm. The client, each time a request comes in, the client library checks for capacity in its own traffic groups. Do they have capacity to serve this request? If they don't have it, then they check for capacity in other traffic groups. And finally, they check with other tenants whether they can serve this request. So if spare capacity is found in your own traffic group, then the request is sent to the backend. Otherwise, they delay it or reject it. So all of this decision, whether the request gets the resource to execute or not, is completely driven by which traffic group it belongs to and which traffic class it belongs to. So if you belong to the gold traffic class, then that means that your request is very latency sensitive. So it would take priority over a silver or a bronze traffic class request. How exactly does Tectonic ensure low latency for gold traffic class. The scheduler prefers requests of a higher traffic class if it determines that whatever lower traffic class request that it has currently will complete in a respectable amount of time. The amount of non-gold non-gold class IOs in flight are limited for every disk, and the disks internally may rearrange the IO request that they are receiving. Because we have many tenants, we also need to ensure that one tenant cannot access data of others. For this, Tectonic has a token-based authorization scheme, which says which resources can be accessed with a particular token. So at the very top level, an authorization service authorizes a request and generates an authorization token for the next layer in the file system. So if we look at our Tectonic architecture again, so the name layer will authorize a request, and then it will generate another authorization token for the file layer, and the file layer will generate another authorization token for the block layer. Let's see how Tectonic does in production. The figure here shows cluster statistics for a 3-day period. Figure A on the left shows the aggregate IOPS, and figure B shows the aggregate disk bandwidth. As you can see, the data warehouse workload has a large and regular load spikes, which are triggered when the batch job runs, while the blob storage traffic is very smooth and predictable. The paper actually says that neither IOPS nor bandwidth can fairly account for disk IO usage. So in order to see whether they're actually sharing surplus IOPS capacity, they measure the disk time, which is how often a given disk in the system is busy. And disk time is used to fairly account for usage by different types of requests. So in the table, we can see that the supply, what Tectonic has for warehouse disk time is 0.51 and blob storage is 0.49. All of these peaks correspond to the peaks that we saw in this slide. So on peak 1, the warehouse actually needed a capacity disk time of 0.6, which it was able to share from the blob storage. Since the blob storage has very predictable pattern, we see that the peak values for disk time mostly lie along the same range. Whereas for the data warehouse, it is it goes up and down frequently. So if data warehouse would have been a separate storage system, it would have required over provisioning. So using whatever surplus that blob storage has, and consolidating both of these storage system needs into a single cluster meant that Tectonic was able to use its resources efficiently. With that, the paper mentions some complex parts of the system which they did for performance gains. So Tectonic stores its data via contiguous Reed-Solomon encoding. This is done to improve space, IO and networking efficiency for large writes. And most of their reads are usually direct, and they say that it does not require RS reconstruction. However, it is difficult to predict the fraction of reads that may need to be reconstructed, which might happen due to a bunch of reasons like node overload. So they restrict all of their reads for their RS encoding to 10% of all reads. This is done to prevent reconstruction storm. And they allow clients to directly access their storage nodes. So bugs, whatever bugs in the Tectonic library, they become bugs in the application. They also mention a couple of trade-offs, which is higher metadata latency as compared to HDFS. HDFS operations are all in memory and it stores all of its metadata on a single node. However, as we saw, Tectonic uses a sharded key value store and all its metadata layers are disaggregated. So the client may end up requiring one or more network calls to get the data that they need. Tectonic also does not provide a recursive list API since all of the data on the metadata layer is hash sharded, as we saw. So listing directories in a directory will query many shards. So tenants need to build it themselves. Due to this hash partitioning, Tectonic is also not able to provide a directory usage functionality, which is the du command. And as a consequence of this, Tectonic periodically aggregates its per directory usage, but that data might be stale when you see it. And this is the end of my presentation. Thank you.